My name is Paul Zenian, and I am responsible for the sculpture in front of Washtenaw Community College. And with regard to my background or credentials, may I say that I have a bachelor's degree in physics from the University of Michigan, which was followed after some years of employment with a Master of Fine Arts degree in painting. And how I got associated with Washtenaw Community College, I think, was very fortuitous, because the college had just opened up in 1966, and I got my graduate degree in 1968. And actually, they were looking for people at that time to teach, to instruct. The community college was up and running, although in entirely different milieu than it is now. We worked out of bowling alley and a Quonset hut and some other things. But I was hired in 1968 to start the art department, or to continue it. They was offering a few courses, not many, and I was hired to get it going. And at that time, I was asked to teach a variety of courses. My background was, I felt I was equipped to teach studio courses in painting and drawing and design, but they also wanted me to teach in art appreciation, so I had to do all that in the beginning. And that's the way it came about. And I often told my students later on, with regard to my own experience, that you don't have to know what you're going to do if you're 18 or 20 or 25 or even 30. That life presents to you different options, different roads. I use myself as an example that when I graduated from college, I never realized that I would end up, teaching studio art in a community college. That's not what I thought of at all. Some people often ask me, even in the work that they see, is this related to my science background? I never used my science background as a means of producing my art, although you can't help but have the two come together. And to this day, I'm really terribly interested in physics, and especially in astrophysics and some of the developments that have come out within the last 30 years. But what moved me was, I think, intrinsically, I was more attracted to visual things than to mechanical things. Deep down inside, I was kind of a visual person. I won't say I was an artist, although I drew at an early age, and I had some teaching when I was going through high school. I was very privileged to go through a private school, and I had an art teacher. And so when I started working in industry, in my spare time, I would visit museums and galleries and all that sort of stuff, and I always thought that was thrilling. And so there was this kind of a push and pull that went on between what I was doing and what I thought I would like to do. Reflecting on the sculpture, what I guess comes to my mind is the fact that it came about really quite quickly and easily, and my idea was that it would be good to have some sort of an identity, an identifier of the college. And so I had the notion that we should have a landmark sculpture, or something which would definitely make a connection with the college and the sculpture, so that people would know, put the two together. And I really didn't think about myself as being the means to have this. I approached President Gundar Myron with an idea that perhaps we ought to have some sort of either a competition or certainly a call for entries, so that we could get a response from a variety of sculptors, and that we could make a selection from that group. Well, to make that a little shorter, he soon came back to me with the ideas, well, would you be one of those candidates? Would you consider yourself one of those candidates? And so I said, well, okay. And I presented a maquette, something which I had been thinking about, not necessarily for the college, but an idea that I had. He liked what I showed him, and he said, we don't need to have other submissions. I think we can go with this if you can kind of make it happen, which required, of course, a lot of consideration as to cost and materials and all this kind of stuff. And as I looked at what I had and saw its possibilities of having a symbolic content as well, and you know, that was very kind of serendipity at that point. I think I'm thinking to myself, there's sculptors around with institutions. I don't think too many of them necessarily conform to some kind of a symbolic content. They're just there because of their aesthetic presence and their appeal. But in this case, I think what happened was that I had an idea of a minimalist type of structure, and within that structure, I saw, looking at it, I saw the possibilities of it also having this latent symbolic content, something which was not terribly conspicuous, but that could be discerned by somebody, and that it would have that kind of, what should I say, intrigue about it, that it could draw people into the sculpture and experience it as they approached it and as they walked through it. And so that's where the idea of the open door sort of solidified and gelled. I wanted the sculpture to be imposing in an artistic way, not in a not in a fearful way, but at the same time, I know I came to realize that many people who might be attracted to it kind of avoided going through it initially, and that bothered me. But that was just by hearsay and just some remarks. I don't know how that takes place, but my intention was that it would attract people, it would draw them to the campus, and they would actually walk up to it and experience it as a three-dimensional object, walk around it, and then have some kind of realization of both the positive and the negative spaces, because that's what it was all about. Sculpture is comprised of that, and as well as some two-dimensional art too. Is that we as artists, we're thinking about not only the spaces that are occupied, but the spaces that are not occupied. And so it was hard for me to imagine what that was going to be like before the sculpture was built. I could only kind of dream about it or fantasize about it, but when it actually went up, I think that it came about to do that. And so now the question is a matter of public response. do people approach it and want to walk through it? Or is it still intimidating to some people because it looks precarious still, you know? Which is okay. I think that presents a little bit of a tension, which is acceptable. I'm trying to think of when the landscape architects were engaged in it, because they did play a part. I especially one principal, Paul Rader of Jackson, Beckett and Rader, who were the landscape architects for the college at that time, was a, you know, we were friends, and he was very sympathetic to this and helpful, and we talked about you know, its placement and making it a part of the overall landscaping plan, so that it was very had an obvious design purpose to it. Also came about the idea of the circular pavement, the bricks underneath it, and I also thought about it in terms of how it would look when you approached it from a distance. Scale was very important. Initially, I think when I first told Gunder about it, you know, we were thinking of something much smaller, maybe on the order of 12 to 15 feet, somewhere around about half the size it is now. And I soon realized that that's not going to work. That's going to be too small. It's got to be much larger than that. And yet, you know, you don't want to make it gigantic to run up the cost. But I wanted to have it such as when you come up to it, right from the curb, the approaching curb, that it would be about as high as the building. And then there were other elements that were there which are not now. I think in the present situation, it's much more significant. We had a rather impressive staircase which came out on both sides, and so it had to compete with that, and I had a difficulty with that. But as it went on over the years, that staircase was removed. That's no longer there, and so it just you know, it just turned out, you know, very fortunate, I think, in that regard. I wasn't part of that, but it certainly, I think, gave the end result a much more suitable result. So the size was important, and then of course I wanted the materials. You know, what was it going to be made of, and how was it going to be maintained? There are lots of monumental sculptures, even in our community. I think there's one down by the U of M Museum of Art, which are painted. But I just didn't want to go to that requirement of maintaining, and unless you do a very, very elaborate painting process, which is very expensive. So I was looking for a material that would sort of take care of itself. And what came to my mind was Corten steel, because it has such a wonderful patina. It also has some sort of a industrial look about it, too. It's used in bridges and other places. And so one could also make an association with the Corten and our industrial base as an aggregate, you know, with all the automobile companies and all that being there. So once I kind of thought about that, I just didn't look any further. And so it was just a matter of finding then a fabricator, and also we needed structural integrity, because the sculpture, the maquette, is just made out of cardboard, and there's nothing too strenuous about it. But this huge thing, it looks like the two parts are supporting each other, and that's certainly intended, but they are not. The engineers had to make it such that they were not actually leaning on each other. They were just kissing each other, so to speak. And so in each of the two units are self-supported, and that's kind of always tickles me, because if you took one away, the other one would still be there, and yet together they make the whole. So it was very, very satisfying to see those two things meet both requirements, both structurally and aesthetically. As an aside on that, it might be interesting to note that some years later, it was decided that, hey, maybe we need to check this out. So they dug the whole thing up and went down and examined the footings and the superstructure, the things that was holding up. There's these rods, long rods that go way down into the ground, way below the frost side, that actually are the anchors for the piece. And so I just thought that was amusing in a sense, and I don't know if it was necessary, but sure enough, everything was fine, and it looks like it's going to be around. Well, there's been some discussion about the name of it, and where does it come from, and is it, really appropriate, and so all that. Well, I make no apologies about the name, because it came about from an interest of mine at the time, which was 30 years ago. And I was, like so many of my colleagues and other people, sort of interested in the Zen concept, and especially in my teaching, I stress the idea that you have to let go, you have to become unpremeditated, and you have to be very, very spontaneous and natural. And of course, what the Zen thought is all about that, not trying too hard, not forcing things. And so, that being the case, I thought, well, we have this idea of a portal that you enter in, which has certain appearance and certain dimensions as you come in, but then which changes as you walk through, and especially as you come back out of it, going from, that would be from south to north, it changes its total appearance. So it's a scalene triangle when you come in, it's an obtuse triangle when you go out. And that I hope would be experienced. And so now, with regard to the name, I came up with this idea of a gateless gate. And dear President Myron, was kind with regard to that, but he thought that this should be the open door. And there was some discussion about that, which it should be named. And I'm going to refrain from an anecdote which sort of nailed that down. But I want to say something in retrospect. In retrospect, when I designed this sculpture and when it was constructed, I was not a Christian. And the gateless gate was fine with me. But now, as I look back, I see that the open door is really a better. That really is what it's all about, because this college offers that opportunity to have a life experience based on understanding, knowledge, empathy, all the things that go with a college education to some degree. And so I'm pleased now that it is referred to it as the open door, because in my mind that connects the concept with the reality of what it is. One of the satisfying aspects of doing something like this is really after the fact. that people bring to it all kinds of other associations and metaphors and connections. And I think we do that with all sculpture. Everything is not preconceived. If it's all preconceived, it's packaged, and that's not where I'm at, and I don't think many sculptors want to go there either. So yeah, you bring these other connections and other associations, metaphors, if you will. So the surface quality was very important to me, primarily for its healing process, so that it wouldn't have to be constantly maintained, which graffiti was a problem from day one and will continue to be. But you know what? The rain and its rust just takes care of it. So you don't have to be scrubbing it down or anything like that. Things happen, one of the just as an aside, one of the things that people found that they could do is throw magnets at it with little smiley faces and all this kind of stuff, which was a little humorous, if not disconcerting. But all those can be resolved. I also want to mention to you, in terms of its design, that I felt the necessity to make this very, what shall I say, discrete in its parameters. It's built on a modular design. I used a module, a measurement, which happens to be 2.5 feet. And so each piece has a multiple of this module in terms of its width, depth, and height. And as it turned out, after this was put together with the angles which I chose, it came to be 22.5 feet high and weigh 14 tons. But that was an important element to me. I wanted to have it that kind of precision involved in it. The reason being, I think, and from my aesthetic, that the simpler a form is, when I say simpler, I don't mean simplistic, but I mean the more essential the forms are, there is a greater, I think, there's a greater possibility and a reality of it having a lasting significance. So I was very conscious of that. I did not want to make it something too complicated or too symmetrical. It had to be asymmetrical, but yet it had to be rather direct and simple in its construction. And so those things can be experienced visually, or if they're not experienced visually, if somebody points them out, they can be re-examined and revisited. So it's one of those things. It's sort of a living thing, if you will. It's not organic in its appearance, but it's certainly organic, I think, in its content. And it has I wanted it to have a strong symbiotic relationship to people and to place, so that it becomes a signifier, an identifier of place, but also, incorporates the atmosphere, the environment of people around it, mulling around it. And I must say, as it stands today, with the improvement in the landscaping and all that, it has really come around to looking as to what I hoped it would be. When it first went up, it was rather bleak, and it was rather stark, and it wasn't, I wasn't too terribly thrilled with it because of its starkness. but now that we have a setting for it, and especially in the summertime when the landscaping is in show, and of course in the wintertime it has another appearance which I like very much. So all those things are hard to prognosticate and predict, but they certainly become part of it. And so I have to give credit to the people who looked after it, and it's I think it's become a real community thing for the college, if I may say so.